All right, so we're here out at a creek and we're gonna talk about long exposures during the daytime. Now we're out here and I wanted to demo and kind of show you this type of scenario. We're at a creek and we're gonna do a long exposure, which means we're gonna leave the shutter open for a long time. We're gonna expose the sensor for a long time. The cool thing about doing that with motion is that you get to see this really cool flow of water, and the light gets to kind of move around and it gets really cool. And we're gonna stick on a tripod like we did in the night session so that the things that are not moving are locked off, they're sharp, they look cool, but the water that's moving will have this cool airy feel to it. So let's go ahead and start with what we got right here. So right now I have the camera on aperture priority. I'm shooting right now at an f4. I found a nice little creek, nice little scene here. I'm gonna autofocus and go ahead and take the shot. And you can see the camera in this shot decided to pick a shutter of 120 because I'm shooting at ISO 200 and I'm shooting at an f4. It's cool, it's got some motion to it, but it's not like a ton of motion. So I'm gonna go ahead and put it at 1 second. I'm gonna put the aperture over to shutter priority. So that means when it's on shutter priority, it will pick the f-stop it needs to be to achieve exposure at the shutter that I've picked. I'm leaving it at 200 ISO because it's daytime, it's really bright out here, and I'm trying to get a lot of light in without overexposing the sensor. So the lowest sensitivity I can make the sensor, the better. Hence, I'm at 200 ISO. It should look really clear. I have it set up here on a tripod because we're leaving it at 1 second. We really want to get the stuff that's not moving in sharpness, and anytime I hand hold it, I won't be able to hold it for a second without moving it. So we're using a tripod. Here we go. See how I clicked it and moved away? So let's take a look at this photo. Cool. Now we see really sharp rocks. We see really sharp mossy green grass in front of us. And we've got some really cool motion coming from the water. That's a really fun way to make a really cool, creative looking water thing. I would actually maybe try and reframe just a little bit. Let's zoom out a little bit and see if we can get it a little bit more airy. We're using the same settings. I'm trying to be cautious when I click the button because any motion you give this will affect the image. So again, we got a really cool, silky looking water and stuff like that. Now my camera only goes down to the dial on a second. Now I do have a mode on my camera where I can go to a T and I can actually select longer than 1 second. I'm gonna select 5 seconds. Now again, since we're at shutter priority, my camera is already telling me that 5 seconds is gonna be too long, it's gonna make my photo too bright, and so it stopped down to an f22. Now, let's see how long I can go before it makes me not use a 22. It looks like 1 second is all I can do. So let's go back up to 5 seconds and let's see what that does. So check out this photo. It is so bright. The water looks pretty cool and silky, but it is so bright. There's no way for me to make that darker at all with this rig that I have set up. There's just too much light coming in for that long of a shutter time. The ISO is too low, the f-stop isn't high enough to let less light in, so we have to do something to make it look better if we want to expose for a longer time. So what are we going to do if we want to expose longer? We want to have more motion, create a more eerie, cool feeling, but we still want to get everything sharp and in focus and exposed. We need to put in a filter. So we use neutral density filters to basically block down the amount of light in, but not change any color or contrast or anything like that. All this does is bring down the levels of light. So for my camera, my lens, I actually have a big stopper. It's a Lee filter, and they make an ND filter that is an ND10. That means we're taking down the light by 10 stops. That means, if we're exposing at a 2.8, we're gonna count up 10 f-stops. That's 2.8, 4, 5, 6, 8, 11, and so on. That's only 4, so imagine how much light we're really cutting down. So let's go ahead and throw that on the front of my lens and let's see what happens. So this is actually my kit lens for my camera, which is my widest lens that I have. And because I don't care about f-stop, I know that it doesn't matter that this is not fast enough for this. But because I can go to an 18 to 55, I have a ton of range. So I bought this adapter. This adapter will circle on to this specific lens. It's got the correct diameter and it just screws on like that. And the reason I have an adapter is because the filter that we're using only sits in this specific Lee holder. So this will hold 2 filters, but because it's so large, I can't get it on my lens, hence the small adapter. So again, I'll be able to just kind of snap it in like so. And then I'll put my filter right in there. You want to be careful with filters. They're very touch sensitive. It'd be very easy for you to get fingerprints on it. So that's why I keep it wrapped in this nice tissue paper. And when you grab it, I grab on the edges. So even if a little bit comes off, it comes off on the sides there. We're gonna slide it in here. I like to slide my filters in the closest slot to the lens I can so that you don't see any other space in between there. And that's a good practice, is get it as close to the lens as humanly possible. So I've got the filter in there, and you can see even when I look through it, it is so dark, I can't see anything. So we're gonna put it right here. Got my filter on. It's a big stopper. It's 10 stops of light. Now, because I know we're stopping down that much, I'm gonna go ahead and plug in my Fuji remote for my specific camera. Basically, this will allow me to push the button for the shutter without having to touch the camera, thus minimizing the movement of the camera, and so we can make sure that we get things that are really sharp. And the reason I do that is because the exposure is gonna be so long. The shutter is gonna be open for so long that any movement it gets is gonna affect the sharpness of the picture. This just plugs in over here. So we're gonna go ahead and frame up the shot. Now, I'm really lucky because I'm using a mirrorless camera. Now in the mirrorless camera, if your camera is sensitive enough, it'll actually be able to see the image through the filter, which is pretty crazy because my older camera, you wouldn't be able to do this, and you'd have to calculate the exact exposure because you just wouldn't be able to see anything. So because I can frame it up without doing calculations, we'll go ahead and move in that method, and then we'll show you how to calculate it in a second. Now right now, my camera is left on 5 seconds of a shutter. Now, it's now telling me that that's too dark, even at the f3.6 that it's picking because we're on shutter priority. So I'm gonna go ahead and move the shutter up with my wheel that I can use. So I've moved my shutter now to 30 seconds, and because we're on shutter priority, it's picked an f-stop of an f4, which is fine, that's great. I want a lot of things in focus. I'd actually appreciate more things in focus, so I want to get a higher f-stop. Now 30 seconds is the max I can go on my camera for actually dialing in shutter, but I am at an ISO 200. So if you think back to our exposure compensation talk, we can up the sensitivity of our sensor so that I can stop down a little bit more and get more things in focus. So I'm going to go ahead and lift my ISO up to, let's say, 800, because that feels like a nice round number, and I know my camera can handle 800 really well. So now my camera has picked an f8 for my shutter at 30 seconds, and it picked the f8 because I'm shooting in shutter priority still, because I want to pick the exact shutter that I want. F8's great, more things will be in focus, more so than the 3.5 that it was giving us before. 800 ISO is wonderful because I know that my camera operates well in 800. Now 30 seconds is kind of a long time. It doesn't seem like it's a long time, but if you take a shot for 30 seconds, you're gonna be sitting here for the 30 seconds that you take the shot, plus, depending on your camera, it then has to process that image and buffer it and create it. So that'll be another probably half of 30 seconds, so 15 seconds. So maybe just for sake of time, let's get it down to 10 seconds. Now remember we were at 5 earlier. Now 10 seconds, it's only giving me an f-stop of 4.5. Not as high as I want it to be. I really would like to hit a 5.6 or above. So let's bump the ISO up again to 1250. Now that's getting us an f-stop of a 5.6 with shutter priority, 10-second shutter. Let's take that shot. Use the remote to push the button. The camera is counting, opening the shutter for 10 seconds at all our settings. The water is moving. The air feels nice. We just gotta wait now. So take a look at this shot. We've got a lot of things in focus, but the water looks really dreamy and movie. Really cool way to kind of get this really creative spot. Now I kind of want it to be even more like, I don't know, mystical. So I think we need more time in the water. So let's go back and let's see if we can push it to 30 seconds. Now we're at 30 seconds. It's giving me an f-stop of 10 because I'm at 1250. Now that we're changing the shutter, I feel like we can drop our ISO back down to 800. And the camera is giving us an f8, which is great. Let's do this 30-second exposure and see what it looks like. All right, so take a look at our shot now. This is a 30-second exposure at 800 ISO and f8. So yeah, this looks great. You can see the water's a little bit more dreamy. We're getting the movement-ish in the water. This river or creek is not moving that fast. So I would suggest the faster moving water stream, the more movement you'll see and you'll get. I think I might actually pan over a little bit, and you can see in the right side of this image, there's a little bit more movement on that side. So let's go ahead and zoom in on that, and we'll see what that looks like. So I panned over a little bit, I zoomed in, and now I'm noticing now that my camera is actually having trouble autofocusing. And that's something to think about when you have a big, giant filter in front of your lens and you can't see anything. Your camera can't see anything either. So I'm kind of focusing on a little bit of sun in the upper left corner that it's able to focus on, it looks like, which is great. If you're not in that situation, most lenses will have the feet and centimeters on the lens and on the back of the screen. So you're gonna have to do your best to use that to focus. The cool thing is that we're shooting at a higher f-stop, so that means we'll have a bigger range of nailing that focus. So let's go ahead and see what this shot looks like. And 30 seconds. Oh yeah, see, like a little bit of a bummer because that rock that I was trying to focus on, remember the sun's hitting, is like super bright, but look how dreamy and silky the water looks because it's moving so much. And the rock on the right is in focus and it's sharp, and you get this really cool movement in the water. So this is a really cool way to shoot sort of water daytime stuff, like an ocean with tide pools, waves, under a pier, a waterfall. So if 30 seconds doesn't seem like enough to you, like say you want to maybe expose this more, or you're not in the shade, like you can see our rock is in the sun, I think having a higher f-stop would be better. More things are in focus, you can stop down a bunch. Adversely though, that's gonna have an effect on your shutter. Now, most cameras will max out at 30 seconds. Some of them you can set for longer, but I'd say generally most of them max out at 30 seconds. So the next step after that is bulb mode. What bulb mode means is you can push the button to have the shutter move up, and then you either let go or push it again to have it come down, depending on your camera. That means you can time out anytime you need for your shutter length. So let's go ahead and take it off shutter priority because we maxed out at 30, so we can get our f-stop down to an f22. Now at an f22, 30 seconds, ISO 800, I can't see a thing. I can't see through the image, the camera can't see anything until we're open for a long time. I'm gonna go ahead and shift my camera into bulb mode. Here we go. Now it's recommended at this point, you're gonna have to keep time yourself. Now whether that's counting in your head, which is always gonna be not the same, or using a timer on something like your phone or some stopwatch, if you've got that, that might actually work better, is gonna be the best way to keep track of your exposure length. So we're gonna go ahead and I'm gonna hit my timer and I'm gonna hit my bulb at the same time. And because we're at 30 seconds, you can do a little bit of the math and use a calculator here. But before we were at 30 seconds and F8, and we've just closed down to a 22. So if we're at an F8, that's 11, 16, 22. We've just went up 3 stops. So without doing math, just kind of judging, 30 seconds not long enough, let's just double that so we can see what effect that has. And that'll be 60 seconds or a full minute. So I'm gonna go ahead and time that out. Here we go. I guess while we're waiting, something to understand about your remotes. Every remote is different. On the Fuji, if you push it and slide it up, it holds the bulb open. As soon as I let go, the bulb will undo. On other cameras, it's you have to hold it down with your hand and maybe there's a little lock. On other remotes, you push it once and you can let go and it's open, and you push it again and it'll close. It really depends on the type of remote and camera system you have. For the Fuji one, it's just this very tiny little USB style remote. Pretty easy to use. Minimizes all the movement on your camera, especially when you're open for a minute. I'm kind of scared to move. Hopefully the wind doesn't blow my camera over. Okay, we're at 50 seconds. 3, 2, 1, bam. So I'm taking a look at the photo now, and it's just too dark. So a minute wasn't enough. Next, if we want to keep the f22, we need to go even higher. I'm just kind of shooting off into the random space here. Is there a way to get around that? Yes, you can download on your phone or a mobile device a calculator that will help you calculate the exact exposure you need. So basically, it starts with a base shutter exposure. You let it know what f-stop you're gonna shoot, and then how many stops of light you're cutting down. Once you put that into your calculator, it'll then tell you what the corresponding time or shutter value you'll need to achieve that same exposure. So in order to get back to that and try and get to our f22 f-stop, let's go ahead and see what a normal exposure would look like without stopping down the light. So I gotta take the filter off. So I've taken the filter off, I've framed up our shot. I can see it now because I have no filter in front. I put it on aperture priority because we want to prioritize our f/22. I'm at an f/22. The camera's giving me 1/5 of a second to basically get this shot at the right exposure. Now Phil's got a calculator over there on the side, and he's gonna go ahead and calculate that and let me know what number I need to shoot at in shutter-wise after putting 10 stops of light in front of our lens. Phil? All right, so Phil's telling me off camera that this is gonna take 3 minutes and 24 seconds. I don't really feel like waiting around for 3 minutes and 24 seconds and then waiting for 2 minutes for it to process. So maybe f/22 is getting a little crazy for this situation. Could do that if you like and you have all the time in the world. We're gonna stop down to an f/11 then, and that's telling me that my base to get an exposure right here is 20th of a second. So let's calculate that and see what that looks like when we put, again, 10 stops of light in front of it. So that calculates to 51 seconds with our 10 stops of light. So let's put this guy back on. Our calculation was 51 seconds, so we're gonna go back into bulb mode, and we're at an f/11. We could kind of see stuff, but not really. We're gonna get our stopwatch, and we're gonna aim for 51 seconds. Ready? Here we go. I heard the shutter start a little bit after I clicked the remote, so keep an eye on that. I might go 52 seconds just to be safe. So we're using an app called Long Exposure Calculator for iOS, and basically every phone has its own app. You can search for Long Exposure Calculator in your app store for whatever system you have, and a bunch of different ones will come up. So I'm looking at this photo now with our long 51-second exposure with our big stopper at f/11, 800 ISO. That's another way to calculate exactly how much time you need based on your other settings. It looks at exposure like our other shots were. You definitely don't need to shoot at an f/11 or a higher ISO, just depends on what situation you're doing. I like to shoot at higher f-stops in these types of situations because one, I'm not always sure with the focus because it's hard to see through the filter, and two, it just looks really nice with like everything in focus and sharp. All right, so we moved over here from our last location. You can probably see my camera bag back there I left, but just creatively, like this is a much cooler shot. It's got more depth to it. There's a little bit more movement in the water, and I just like it a lot more. The rocks are contrasty. We're all in the shade, so the exposure will be clear the whole way versus having some sunspots. So let's go ahead and take a normal photo. I'm at completely on auto on everything. The camera's giving me a 60th of a shutter, f4 at 200 ISO. Here we go. Click. Water looks frozen. Very cool. Cool reflections. Let's go ahead and put the big stopper on, and we'll go to shutter priority, and so I can stay under 30 seconds. So I went ahead and put my ISO at 800 so I get a little bit more information. I put it at 30 seconds to get a lot of movement. It's a long shutter that's open, and the camera itself is picking an f/20 for me, which means lots of things will be in focus. I've plugged in my remote so I don't shake the camera. We're gonna push it. Here we go. So check out this photo. This looks awesome. I really love it. I got a lot of contrast going on, which I personally like a lot. You can see the movement in the water. The reflections aren't very good because the water's moving and we're leaving that long exposure open. I really love this shot. It looks really dark and cool. But you can see how big of a difference. Compare this shot with the one we took without the long exposure. There's two completely different moods. They're two completely different photos. The movement in the water just adds a whole ethereal feel to it. This is a really fun thing to go and play with. So now you have this wonderful new skill to do with long exposure during the day. As you can tell earlier, you don't necessarily need a filter, although it does help. They're not super expensive. You can find them online for your specific lens and camera. This is another tool in your photographic arsenal of tools to be able to get out there and make some really cool creative shots.